the Jewish sound around and about with your walking Jewish encyclopedia, Isaac Resnick, only on 20 Chai. Good morning and welcome to my very, very special guest, Les Glasman from Israel, and of course to Ilan Whittaker. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. You went to Camp Kesha. It's wonderful to see you, Les.
So good to be here, Lionel.
And tell me what's the latest, what's happening in Israel. And today, of course, we're going to dedicate this program to three people, and I want you to tell us who they are.
Okay, well, first of all, it's such a pleasure to be here. It's such a pleasure to see you, Isaac, well and about, please God, in good health. And Ilan, it's nice to see you this morning. So I've been here. I just came from Israel about a week and a half ago. And it was amazing because so much happens in Israel. Every day something's happening. But as you said, we want to dedicate this show. And I'd like to dedicate it to three unfortunately, it's two people and one unborn baby that passed away. The one was actually killed. We have Hilton Silberstein, who was a very close friend, is a close friend. He's from King David. His daughter was pregnant in her 7th month, and there was a terrorist, Barghouti, who actually drove past and shot her, and she was pregnant, and shot her husband. They were waiting at the bus. He's from Beit El, and they're from Ofra, and they were at the bus stop on a Motzei Shabbos, and the bullet went right through, and unfortunately they had to do a C-section, and the baby, I saw Chaim Silberstein, the day after it happened, Motzei Shabbos, on the Sunday night, I went to Shaare Zedek, and I saw Chaim and the family, saw Isidore Rubenstein. Chaim's wife's related to Isidore Rubenstein, and he told me it's not good for the baby, and their daughter was in a very critical situation. And then he said it was one of the greatest miracles. The bullet went right through the body and didn't touch the main blood vessels, which is a tremendous miracle. But unfortunately, the baby didn't make it, and they had to bury the unborn baby. Was 7 months. So Baruch Dayan Emet. And then, unfortunately, just 2 Shabbases ago, a very close friend and a very close friend of my brother's, Jackie, in Efrat, Meish Lapidus. His father actually came from Boysk in Latvia. And Meish is one of the nicest people I've ever met. He was in the choir with Richard Savitson. He's lived in Efrat for many years. He was from Yeshiva College. And such a wonderful person. Unfortunately, he had a heart attack just before Shabbos, and he was nifta. And it's so sad. His daughter's going to be having, Bezrat Hashem, a wedding, not this Wednesday, the following Wednesday, that Lucy and I will be going to. So it will be very sad that the father won't be at the daughter's wedding. And we just wish the family just that they should know no more tzoros. And then I just heard as well, and Isaac, you knew Mike Samuels very well, Zichron Livracha.
I was very, very, very close to Mike Samuels. I knew him from... Would remember his late wife, the first wife, Karen
Gass,
died in a most freak accident. Not a car accident. They had their little baby, Danny, in the back of the car, and Karen turned round and got a whiplash, and she died immediately.
And Isaac, I'll mention something.
And
it was at the same Parshat Chaye Sarah.
Yeah, yes.
And that's where Sarah also heard about the Akedah.
Yeah, and that's why
she was also nifta, and nothing really happened at that Akedah.
And then Mike and I became very, very close friends. We were together for many years. He was involved with me in the medical bookshop at university, at Wits University. It was called Medicus when I started it.
I remember that.
And Danny and I were very close. We went all over together.
That was his daughter.
I literally brought her up until the age of when they went on Aliyah. And Mike, a dentist, he had his practice in Bedford View, and my brother Meish set up all the computers for him. I was very close to the family then. It was Tilly Gass and the late Charles Gass and the 2 sisters, Julian and Stephanie. It's a tragedy. I'm so upset to hear about it.
Terribly upset.
Please God, may they have no more tzoros, that family. And then Mike remarried Gita Greenblatt, children with him.
And
So I want to wish
a wonderful lady and a
Wonderful
lovely family
lady. And
from Germiston, the Greenbacks are
Germiston,
from
yes.
Germiston.
And as a matter of fact, her family were cousins of the late Chief Rabbi Cyril Harris
Oh, that's amazing.
Greenblatt. And just to mention also that Mike and I, we also were involved in the Goldberg's bookshop, which I owned. Remember the Jewish
I remember
bookshops
very
as well.
It was in
So-
town and then it was in Yeovil.
Yeah, in Yeovil. Then we moved to. Then we had opened up a branch in Linksfield to supply all the King David
Yeah.
schools. So I just want to wish the family Chaim Tovim Arukim a long and a good life, and may they have no further sorrows.
And Besorot Tovot.
Right,
And
now
only-
let's
only-
hear some good news. And what is your latest happenings in Israel?
So we know there's going to be elections, and we know that every day being in Israel is a total miracle. Every single day, it's just amazing. I think that's the greatest miracle of Am Yisrael, is that we have a state of Israel and that the country survives. I mean, we have empires. I just came via Egypt on Air Egypt, and I spent time in Cairo, and Cairo is massive, and you think it's an empire. And just that Israel survives, and that with the help of Hashem, that we've survived over 70 years. It's every day we have to be grateful, and we have to look at it as a miracle. And Isaac, today we're going to talk about another tremendous, amazing miracle, the miracle of the Mir Yeshiva and the escape from Lita. So I want to ask, when I ask people, has anybody heard of Sugi Hora? And unfortunately, not too many people have heard of him. I work in Yerushalayim, in Rechavia, and also in Goela, and I have a lot of patients who are in the Mir Yeshiva. And if you look at the history of the Mir, it was the only yeshiva that escaped intact,
Yes.
that survived intact as well.
And you know, they originally went to Japan.
Yeah,
They managed to get it, but you'll give us a story about Sugihara, I remember.
So I'll
Very
just
well.
start how it happened. A few years ago, and I would really encourage all our listeners, my wife and I went on a heritage tour to Lithuania. The scholar in residence was a very close and very dear friend of mine, Hugh Reichlin. And I'm indebted to Hugh, because Hugh's the one who actually told me the story. Why did Sugihara do what he did? I made a movie of that trip to Lithuania, and we showed it after our trip. We were in Kovno and Vilna, in Latvia, Lithuania, and Belarus. We saw the Mir in Belarus. Today it's the post office. But it was the most amazing, life-changing experience, that trip. And it took me 3 months to do this video, to edit, and it's not an easy procedure, but I did it, and you can all watch it. You just go Les Glassman, Lita. Anyway, we showed it. We had the premiere at the World Mizrahi in Yerushalayim, right next to the Great Synagogue. And we had a lot of people that came to that event. It was very well attended. And Hugh gave a talk. He was here, he was in Israel, and he mentioned the most phenomenal story. He asked the audience, why did Sugihara do what he did? Sugihara was, for our listeners who don't know, he was the consul general who was sent from Japan to be in Kovno in 1939, at the end of 39. He came 2 months before Hanukkah, in about October. Now, there never was a consulate, there never was an embassy, a Japanese embassy in Lithuania. There was one in Latvia, but not in Lithuania. I don't even know if there was one in Latvia, but there wasn't a Japanese consulate or embassy ever in Lithuania. And you'd think the war has already started. In September the 1st, when the Germans, Yamach Shemam, invaded Poland, it's interesting. It took the Germans less time to conquer the whole of Poland than to destroy the Warsaw Ghetto. It's one of the most amazing facts of history. Anyway, when the Germans, Yamach Shemam, when they invaded Poland, a lot of Polish Yidden crossed the border into Lithuania. Lithuania was independent. They were staying in Kovno and in Vilna and in the outlying areas of Lithuania. And the Lithuanian Jewish community were very warm. It's a very warm community, and it was a very special community. They helped the Polish Yidden. They helped their brothers, and they would put them up, and they would help them financially in many ways. So Hugh told us the story, and it really blew me away. I've never ever heard such a story before. So what happens is, for our listeners who don't know, and I'll ask you, Isaac, have you ever heard of Soli Ganor?
Yes, yes.
Ah, so you're one of the very few. Soli was an 11-year-old Jewish boy living in Kovno. His parents, Chanukah time, gave him Chanukah geld. The next day, he's alone at home. His brother and his sister are out, and his parents are out. Two women knock on the door, and they say, "Is there any money lying around to help the Polish Yidden?" So Soli looked around, and he didn't find any, but he had the Chanukah geld that his parents had given him. So he took out of his pocket the Chanukah geld, and he gave it to the two ladies to help the Polish Yidden. He gave tzedakah. Anyway, he's walking along it's a main boulevard in Kovno. I've been there. It's still the same today as it was in the time of, in 1939. Lefkos Avenue, it's Freedom Avenue. And he walks down this avenue, and he sees an advert for Laurel and Hardy. You remember Laurel and Hardy?
Laurel and Hardy, famous two comedians.
So he wanted to see the movie of Laurel and Hardy, but he had no money because he had given it all away. So he went to his aunt. He had a very close connection with his aunt. His aunt's name was Anushka. He was very close with her. And he goes into she had a confectionery shop. And inside the confectionery shop, he sees an Oriental person. And he's never seen somebody with slanted eyes before. He stares at this person. You know, even today, in Lithuania, you don't see many foreigners. It's a place not too many foreigners come to. Anyway, he sees this foreigner, this Oriental person. He stares at him. Then he tells his aunt that he gave some tzedakah, some charity. Could she give him some money to see the film? And she says, with pleasure. She goes to the till, and she tells Sugihara, who was only sent there 2 months before. And you question, why on earth would the Japanese why would they open up a consul when the war's already started? There's no tourism, there's no economics. The war's already started. Germany's invaded Poland. Why open up a consulate? So his son actually mentioned in a video and in many writings that they used to go on picnics, and his father used to disappear for about 2 hours, and he used to always write notes and take pictures, and he actually was an intelligence officer as well, and he was spying on what the Germans and the Russians were doing for the Japanese government. And they opened up the consulate as a cover, but it was a proper functioning consulate. The main reason was to save the Mir and to save the Yidden. He didn't know that, but that was the main reason. Anyway, so Soli tells his aunt that he gave this tzedakah. Can she give him money to see the film? And she tells Sugihara that this is my nephew, that he gave a bit of charity. I'm going to give him money to see the film. And she spoke to him in Russian, and Soli understood Russian. Anyway, Sugihara comes up to Soli, and he takes out of his pocket money to give Soli. And Soli turns and he says to him, and they spoke in Russian, I can't take from you, you're not my family. So Sugihara says to Soli, I'll be your uncle. Soli immediately says, if you're my uncle, you have to come to house for Chanukah. And that changed Jewish history. Because what happened is, Motzei Shabbos, Sugihara, his name was Shoene Sugihara, with his wife, Yokiko, and his son, and the aunt from the confectionery shop, Anushka, they all went to Soli's home for Chanukah, for the Chanukah party. And it's the very first time that Sugihara had ever been in a Jewish home. Soli's parents were quite surprised to see a Japanese diplomat coming for a Chanukah party in 1939, Chanukah time. Soli's parents were helping a Polish father and a daughter that escaped from Poland. And his name was Greenblatt. He couldn't believe this Polish Yid, and he was in shock that here in a Jewish home during the war, there's a diplomat in a Jewish home. He just couldn't believe it. It was like, in Hebrew say, lo yaman, it's something unbelievable. Anyway, he told Sugihara how bad it was for the Yidden in Poland, and how he had escaped, and how difficult it was, and how bad it was, and how terrible the Germans were already persecuting the Jews, and how his wife was killed. It was terrible. And Sugihara didn't know this, and he listened very carefully to what Mr. Greenblatt was saying, and he was crying, and it was a very emotional evening. But they sang, and they ate the food, and they all got on very well. Sugihara invited Soli to come to the consulate because he heard that Soli collected stamps, and Soli used to go to the consulate. The consulate is in the suburbs of Kovno, and Soli often used to go to the stamps to collect stamps, and they had a very close connection between Soli's parents and the Sugiharas. Anyway, this Polish Yid told other Polish Yidden that it's incredible. There's this Japanese diplomat in Kovno that has a close kesher. He's got a close connection with the Jews. So it was quite a few weeks later, a few months even, a whole lot of Jews decided they were getting desperate because The Russians were approaching. They knew they needed to leave. They knew that it's only a matter of time that the Germans are going to come. Anyway, they came to the consulate. And there's a very famous picture of the Jews outside the consulate. This is the picture of the Jews outside the consulate. Anyway, there's about 200 Yidden outside the Japanese consulate. It's in the suburbs of Kovno. Sugihara and his wife, they see a mass of 200 people standing outside the consulate. He says, he comes outside and he said, I'd like to see if I can help. They send a delegation of 5. They go inside the consulate. The head of the delegation was Zorach Verhaftig. Zorach Verhaftig in itself, he's a tremendous hero, a Jewish, tremendous modern day hero of Am Yisrael. He was actually, his wife, he came from Warsaw originally, and he was head of the Zionist movement. He was very, very, very learned. He was Mizrahi, and he was there to help. He actually came to Kovno in order to help the Yidden. He had a few certificates that the British only allowed a very small amount of certificates that you could go to Palestine, life-saving certificates. And he had in his own suitcase a few. He could have taken his wife, and his wife was pregnant at the time, and they could have gone off to Palestine and saved their own selves. But he gave his life-saving certificate to his uncle, and he said, I have to help the Jews here in Kovno. And his wife agreed with him, and he stayed in Kovno till near the very end, before the Germans came in. Anyway, what happened is that he asks Sugihara, can you give us transit visas? And Sugihara had already given a few to a few individuals, but he said for a whole group, I have to get permission from the government. So he telexed Japan, and he telexed more than once. I say 2 or 3 times he telexed Japan, and the answer was no. Definitely no. Under no circumstances can you give certificates. Can you give these visas, these transit visas? We don't allow you. That night, both Shwene and Yukika Sugihara were in a dilemma. What do we do? They remember the evening they had at the Genoz. They knew that if they don't help these Jews, they're going to land up like what happened in Poland. The next day he came outside and he said to the crowd who was still waiting, they waited the whole night, he said, we're going to issue these visas. And from that moment, it was about 3 weeks, he started writing out. He had to do it by hand. It was very time-consuming and very difficult in Japanese script, and he started writing out these visas. The people that were standing outside, he didn't say, I'm going against my government. They just thought that Japan's agreed to issue the visas. Anyway, Zorach Verhaftig then went to the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, and he said, you really need to leave. And he sent Moshe Zupnik with 300 passports that they had, and they came, and this Moshe Zupnik came to Sugihara, and he told him that he was from the Mir, and explained everything what the Mir was. And he said, if you're prepared to help, let's just do it. And that's how the Mir was saved. So when I heard the story about a little boy that gave a little bit of tzedakah, that did Hachnasat Orchim, that changed Jewish history, I could not believe it. And Hugh mentioned to us that he's actually met him. He's alive, and he lives in Israel. So immediately after that talk, I said to Hugh, please, can you give me his phone number? And he gave me the number, and I phoned Soli. And on Motzei Shabbos, immediately, I think the same Motzei Shabbos, I went to see Soli. He lives in Ramat HaSharon. He's 90 years old. When I came to see him, I've never met anybody like this in my life. His mind is so sharp. His memory is like very similar to you, Isaac. He's like an encyclopedia like you. He remembers all the details. We sat and I interviewed him for about over 2 hours. And I said to Soli, have you got any regrets? And he said, of course. He said, looking back, I would have made sure that my father took the visas that Sugihara had offered us. But he had a business and he couldn't sell it, so we stayed behind. And he said, unfortunately, he went through the ghetto in Kovno. Then he was sent to Dachau. He was very close with Viktor Frankl in Dachau. He met Viktor Frankl and he knew him in Dachau. And then he was on the death march. And unbelievable, in that death march, guess who saved him? Isaac, guess who saved him in that death march? Did you know that there were Japanese American soldiers that had volunteered in the American armed forces? And there were Japanese American soldiers that liberated Dachau. And they found him in the snow, and they dug him out of the snow. And it's because of Japanese-American soldiers that they revived him.
We're going to take a break for a moment, and we'll come back. Welcome back. We're talking to my very good friend, Les Glassman, and I'm sure you were fascinated with that unbelievable story about Sugihara.
So Isaac,
and I just want to mention that when they all went there, they formed the Mir Yeshiva in Japan, in Kobe, and then later on they moved it to Shanghai. And you know that the two people who were in the Mir Yeshiva, who came from Europe, one was Rabbi Weinberg, who's here, his late father, and Rabbi...
is Rabbi Bokov.
No, Rabbi Yossi Goldman's grandfather.
But also Rabbi Bokov. Rabbi Bokov's
as well.
Parents were married in Shanghai.
And there was a famous Chazan Bagley as well.
I remember Chazan Bagley.
Bagley as well. They went, then afterwards, of course, they went to Israel, where they reformed the yeshiva. And when you mentioned Warhaftich, today Rabbi Weinberg has got a yeshiva in Pretoria, and when he gives his all his Talmidim smicha, they bring out the son of Rabbi Warhaftich.
That's Rabbi Yaakov.
Yeah, Yaakov, and he gives them smicha.
Sure. So I want to show you, Isaac, with the story that you told us, and when I went to see Soli, some people have been skeptic, and they said, "How can it be?" Now, I gave a talk at the Chofetz Chaim Shul here, and Rabbi Goldschmidt, whose brother is one of the head of the European Rabbonim in Europe. After I gave the talk, it was just before we lit the candles on Hanukkah last year, he said to me he's never heard such mussar, that by giving a little tzedakah and doing Hachnasat Orchim, it changed Jewish history.
Correct.
But the whole story is, how do we know that the story is true? So, Soli showed me this book, Visas for Life, that Mrs. Sugihara wrote. After, what happened is, actually I'll just mention, when they eventually did try to find Sugihara to thank him, and it was very difficult because after the war, he actually did lose his job. He got a very small pension, because I think it was mandatory to give a pension, but he had no work, he had no cover, he was persona non grata. He had to go to Russia to find employment, to have work, and he had a very hard life. One of his sons died, he had no money. Anyway, they did find him eventually. There was a Mr. Nisri, who worked in the Israeli embassy in Tokyo, and he tracked him down. And they said to Mr. Sugihara, "We are so grateful, we are eternally grateful, we want to pay you." And he said, "I don't do it for money, I don't want any reward." And they realized that he couldn't even support his youngest son. So the Israeli government gave a bursary for the youngest son to come to Hebrew University. And in 1969, he was studying at Hebrew University, and Sugihara came to the university.
As a matter of fact, when Sugihara passed away, in Yerushalayim, you've got what they call the righteous.
He was made Chasidei Matalam.
Yeah, he was made one of the righteous Gentiles. And as a matter of fact, there's a rabbi called Rabbi Takaya who wrote a book called the Fugu Plan. I've got the book here, I showed it to you, show everyone. And he was the rabbi in Japan for many, many years. And he wrote all about Sugihara.
Yeah, it's an amazing book.
And it's amazing because the photographs, there are unseen photographs.
So here was Sugihara and his wife outside the consulate.
And it's unbelievable in some of the visas that he issued.
And this is the Jews they met outside, waiting outside the consulate.
Yeah. So it's a wonderful story. And when Rabbi Takao came to South Africa, then he came with an American tour. I took them around the whole country and introduced him to the late Chief Rabbi Cyril Herzatzal. And really, he told us amazing stories about Sugihara in Japan.
So I want to show you what happened is that he was given Chasidei Motalam in 1985, and he was already a bit too old, and he was not known in Japan. So when he was given the Chasidei Motalam, his wife and the children went to Tokyo to get the award at the Israeli embassy, and it was reported in the press.
No.
And then he was nifta a year later. He was born on the 1st of January 1900, so he was 86 years old. Anyway, the children said to Mrs. Sugihara, "Yokika, you need to write a book because it's going to be forgotten." So she wrote this book called Visas for Life. And in the book, it's very interesting, and this I'll be giving you, Isaac. Here's a picture of Mrs. Sugihara and Sugihara.
Right.
The Vice President, Walter Mondale, writes in her book. He was the Vice President of America.
In America, yes.
And he writes in the book that he is a unique person in world history because what he did is absolutely unique.
Well, he saved hundreds of lives of Jews.
Thousands, literally thousands. He wrote over 2,000 visas that saved then over 6,000 Jews. They say 6 to 7,000. That today, the estimates, every year it goes up, but they say there's over 50,000 Jews in the world, thanks to Sugihara. So Sally showed me this, and I could not believe. When people say, how do you know the story is true? It's an incredible story, but how do you know it's true? So Mrs. Sugihara wrote in her book, and Isaac, I'd like you to read it. Here's a picture of Sally. And look what she wrote in her book. This is in her book what she wrote. If you could read it for the audience, for our listeners out there.
Shiana Sugihara's decision to issue visas may have been influenced by a 14-year-old Jewish boy named
he was 11.
Soli Ganor. He invited Mrs. Sugihara to celebrate the first night of Hanukkah in 1939 with his family. This may have been Sugihara's first contact with a Jewish family in Konyas.
So this is written by Mrs. Sugihara in her book, Visas for Life, and she says here that Shwene Sugihara's decision to issue visas may have been influenced by a Jewish boy called Soli Ganor. So here inside the book, we have a picture of Zorach Verhaftig.
Right.
And I met with Zorach's eldest son, Emmanuel. And Zorach Verhaftig, for our viewers out there who don't know, he really literally got onto one of the last trains just before the Nazis invaded. And the NKVD were searching for him. And he got to Japan. And even in Japan, he went from embassy to embassy. He also organized the transit visas through Russia. That was under communist Russia. They could go from Moscow to Vladivostok. And then from Vladivostok, they had to take a boat to Tsuruga, and then from there to Kobe. But what's amazing is I'm very close with Soli. And Soli told me that the Japanese ambassador wants to come and visit him. And I thought that is one visit that I really want to be at. So I phoned the Japanese embassy, and they asked me who I was. I'd send a CV. And this is the Japanese ambassador. He came to see Soli. He spent 2 hours. Soli is now 91. And it's very hard for Soli to leave his home. But the Japanese ambassador came, and he spent 2 hours in Soli's home. That was incredible.
Oh, look at this, Ilan.
And Isaac, but this is for you. So this is Soli. He has his wife in the middle. And this is when the Japanese ambassador came. And then I just want to give you this. This is something really quite remarkable. What happened is that the Japanese ambassador, on behalf of the Japanese government, issued Soli with an award. And here is Soli very proudly holding his award that is written by the Japanese embassy. Isaac, is it okay if you can read?
No, I can't.
Okay, so can I read it for our listeners? This was from the Japanese embassy, from the Japanese government. On behalf of the Japanese government, I'd like to express my sincere appreciation for your significant contribution in deepening mutual understanding between Japanese and Jewish people and promoting bilateral relations of Japan and Israel. Your story, while bringing home the horror of the Holocaust, has touched so many people with your courage and your compassion, shown in extreme situation. Your account about your encounter with the Japanese diplomat Shwene Sugihara also reminds us of the deep historical bond that exists between our two peoples. I believe that your efforts to share your story with so many Japanese people have strengthened the foundation for a greater friendship between Japan and Israel. Best wishes for your health and your long life. Koji Tomita, Ambassador of Japan. So I'll just, when I mention this, I wrote, his term of office was expiring and he was going back to Japan. So I just sent an email, a simple email to the Japanese ambassador thanking me for allowing me to be at that very important and very, very amazing encounter that he came, that visit. And he replied to me, he said, "Dear Dr. Glassman, thank you very much for your thoughtful message. I too very much enjoyed the meeting with Mr. Ganor, which will remain one of the fondest memories of my time in Israel. I wish you and Mr. Ganor continued health and happiness for years to come. With regards, Koji Tomita." Unbelievable. And then if I can just mention this, Isaac, I don't know if you've known or if you've heard of Chaim Valkin. Chaim Valkin has a relation, Balfour Valkin, here in South Africa.
Yes.
But Chaim was born in Shanghai in 1945. His father, his late father, was Shmuel Valkin. He was one of the main Rabbonim that got a visa, that went to Shanghai. He was married. In fact, his father was very close with the Chofetz Chaim. And there's a very famous picture of the Chofetz Chaim sitting outside his home. There's two women on the one side, on the right side, and on the left side there's a bocher. That's his father. And Reb Elchanan Wasserman, one of the greatest,
Yes.
he actually made his parents shidduch. He suggested the shidduch. So Reb Chaim lives in Beit Vegan. He's very close with Yaakov Ahavtik, who you mentioned, who comes to South Africa. Yaakov teaches Dayanos in Beit Vegan. Anyway, Reb Chaim heard that I'm very involved in the story and invited me to his home. I'd seen him often, but I'd never been in his home. And I went in, and he told me about how he was born in Shanghai. He told me that he had always heard, as a boy, that there was a Jewish boy growing up. Because they also thought, why would Sugihara do what he did? But he always heard his parents telling him that there was a Jewish boy that invited Sugihara to Hanukkah. When I told him that this Jewish boy is still alive, and his name's Sodi, and he lives in Ramat HaSharon, he got so emotional. Immediately, I think that same week, it was on a Yom Yerushalayim, we went to see Soli. And here's a picture of Reb Chaim Valkin with the Rebbetzin, with Soli and Paula, his wife. And it was the most amazing thing to see. Because here you had the Mashgiach of Ateris, who was born in Shanghai in 1945. When he first saw Soli, he hugged him and he cried. And he cried and he said to Soli, it's because of you I'm alive. And because of you my family survived. It was something so emotional to see. And it was so special. They sat in the kitchen. Soli's wife had prepared cake and tea and coffee. And they schmoozed for about 2 hours. And it was just the most amazing thing to see. And what was very interesting with this, the Rosh Yeshiva of Mir, Rav Finkel, personally came to give Reb Chaim Valkin an invitation for his son's wedding. The Rebbetzin told me this, and I'm quite close with Reb Chaim. I have a very close kesher, Baruch Hashem. So when he came to see Reb Chaim told him that he had just been to see Soli, and he told him the story of Soli. And I remember when the Japanese ambassador came to see Soli told the Japanese ambassador that a very important rabbi came to see me. So that meeting had such a profound influence on both their lives. And it's such a zchut that I've been able to meet with these amazing people. There was an article, I don't know if you get the Jerusalem Post here.
Occasionally, yes, you get it here, but you can get it online on the... Right.
So there was an article that was written by Leanne Grunberg Wakabayashi, and she wrote about Soli. She was there at that encounter when the meeting when the Japanese ambassador came, and it's called A Hero's Hero. And she called Soli a hero's hero because Sugihara is the hero, but Soli is also the hero.
Yes.
So she wrote this magnificent article, which I'll leave with you, called A Hero's Hero.
Oh,
and very recently there was an article in the New York Times by a David Wolpe, the Japanese man who saved 6,000 Jews.
Right.
So I just want to mention, we'll do another program on they had to get entry visas into Curacao. That is a whole other program, and I'll just give a little bit of an insight into that. It all was because of, his name is, if you have a look over here, he was on the front page, the front cover of, the very front cover of both Mishpacha and Ami, Nathan Lewin. His mother, Pesia Lewin, was very instrumental. In fact, she got the very first Curacao entry visa. But that will be for another time.
Well, I just want to thank Les for this most enlightening, unbelievable story. It's a pleasure having you. I know you always
Isaac,
got
it's
something
always
to tell
such a
us.
pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure, and I want to thank my very good friend Ilan for controlling.
Ilan, thank you very much.
And
Isaac, thank you very much.
Wish you everything of the best, Hatzlocha and Brocha, and please God, we'll get together again. So
and we'll do the
you.
second part, a
Go
fascinating story also on the Curacao entry visas.
Go well. Thank you very much.
And a Shavua Tov.